Welcome back, everybody. We are in one of my favorite towns here in Texas, Austin, the capital. Such a lovely place. And that's because Panasonic has brought us out here. They put us up. We really appreciate it. But of course, it won't influence decisions in any way on this thing, the brand new Panasonic S1 II. And you know, because it's been so long since we've been in Austin, we decided to hire a local guide. We're paying him, well, let's just say it's not money. And I like working with Matt Johnston because he's the same height as me, so I don't feel like emasculated in any way. Look at that. Oh, yeah, we are. Yeah, exactly. We appreciate Matt's help. We're going to explore the city today. We're going to play with the S1 II. I'm Chris Niccolls. This is PetaPixel, not F-stoppers.
Not F-stoppers.
Let's get to it. So anytime we test a brand new camera that we haven't seen before, like the S1 II, we want to have cards that we know are reliable, are fast, so it doesn't slow down the camera in any way, and give that maximum compatibility. And that's why we actually really like OWC cards. We always end up bringing these in our trips. Here I've got the Atlas Pro, here I've got Atlas Ultra, and of course the Panasonic S1 II takes both CFexpress Type B and SD cards. OWC go through a lot of testing to make sure their cards are reliable and compatible with as many cameras as possible. I just know that these are going to be fast enough so that any camera I put these cards into, it's going to handle the data maximum speed possible. And then when I get home and I want to transfer all that to my computer, the CFexpress cards are going to follow that 4.0 spec. So they're going to give me the fastest input possible. And you know, when you pair these with OWC's own readers, you actually unlock a lot of interesting features. So you get to use their innergize software, and this lets you allow and view and manage your card, check the card health, make sure that firmware is up to date, sanitize anything back to factory settings if you need to. So definitely have a look at OWC cards if you want the fastest, most reliable and compatible cards on the market that you can monitor the health of over the lifetime of the card. Click the link in the description below and get yours today. So of course, for this video, I'm going to be shooting on a Panasonic S1 II, but Jordan is also going to be filming the entire episode on another Panasonic S1 II. And Jaron, our editor-in-chief, who's also here, we're very happy about that, he's going to be doing a lot of shooting on the S1 II-E. E stands for Essentials. It's effectively the same camera, but without the partially stacked sensor. But we're not really going to talk about that camera in this video. So back to the S1 II. So stacked sensor, what gives? Well, the Panasonic S1 II is using a partially stacked sensor, very similar to what we saw in the Nikon Z6 III. And as far as I know of, this is only the second mirrorless camera to use that partially stacked sensor. So the beauty of the partially stacked sensor is that it gives us quite a few benefits, but it's still a good compromise between performance and price. We're going to be getting slightly faster readout speeds, maybe not as fast as an expensive fully stacked chip, but quite close. So first off, it's going to minimize things like rolling shutter. If I'm doing electronic shutter, fast movement sports, I'm not going to get those weird diagonals as much. It also lets me get a higher burst rate when I'm using electronic shutter mode, in this case up to 70 frames per second, which makes this a far more competitive camera if you want to get into things like sports and action.
But honestly, where we're seeing the biggest advantage with the partially stacked sensors is in video mode, because with the previous 24 megapixel cameras, you'd have to crop if you wanted to record 4K 60. High frame rate 4K wasn't even an option with that, where here we do have a small crop when we go to 4K 120, but we're still getting a ton of information there. 4K 60 without a crop. And of course, the other benefit is we're just not getting nearly as much of that rolling shutter wobble while you're recording in 4K on this camera. It's just going to give us much nicer looking footage.
What I do is I brace it on my face like this, and then it's actually like a stabilizing support. I can teach you how to do this. It's a pretty cool trick. I mean, I came up with it all by myself. All right, I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about handling on the S1 II while there's a couple of hose behind me in the background. So this is going to operate basically exactly the same as the S1R2. I mean, we've got the exact same chassis, same body, same weight. It'll use all the same rigs and all the same cages. This is going to have the same card setup as well, single UHS-2 SD card slot, as well as the CFexpress Type B card slot and the BLK22 battery inside. And I know I'm rushing through this pretty quickly, but it's because the control structure is the exact same. We've seen it before. And Panasonic do know how to make a really nice control scheme. Lots of customization, lots of buttons, good control dials, everything feels solid. I like the locking switch on the mode dial. I like the fact that we have the selector switch for photo and video on here as well. Displays are also going to be the same. We're getting that excellent 5.76 million dot EVF. You can boost up to 120 frames per second if you want. We're also getting this fully articulating touchscreen panel, and I do like how that articulates. This gives you every possible permutation that you would want out of a screen. Okay, so the 24 megapixel image quality out of this partially stacked sensor, we've seen it before. It's going to be very similar to the Nikon Z6 III. And this does give us good all-around performance. We're getting usable dynamic range, but keep in mind there will be a bit of a hit to the dynamic range compared to a non-stacked sensor like you would find in the Panasonic S1 II. In fact, that's one reason you might want to go to that camera to get the older non-stacked BSI sensor. That being said, the dynamic range is still perfectly acceptable for most situations, and it will be the same whether you're shooting mechanical shutter or electronic shutter. That's a really nice thing.
But it's kind of a different story if you're looking at the video recording on this camera, because most cameras like that S1 IIe Chris just mentioned have to drop the bit depth when they're recording video for a faster readout speed. But because we've got the partially stacked sensor in this, that's not necessary. So you're actually getting extremely good dynamic range on this. Panasonic is saying it's actually the best DR they've put on any of their Lumix cameras up to this point. Much like we saw with the S1 II, this also has the ability for dynamic range boost. And I can say in extremely high contrast situations like we've got today, the dynamic range is absolutely sufficient on this camera.
Now, as much as we're enjoying Austin, Matt Johnson offered to bring us to his hometown. You can't refuse that. That's a great thing to do. So he lives very close by in a town called New Braunfels, and he's promising us a American cultural icon that we just have to see. Okay, all right, so we just came out of Buc-ee's there, and I tell you what, I am converted. That place is amazing. If you're in the area, you have to visit this place. Thank you very much, Matt. That is awesome. So another thing I want you guys to see here, just that reminds me, because we are doing a camera review, is you can see them dark clouds up there. I tell you what, it could start raining at any moment. Nice thing is I have to worry about that through the S1 II. This thing is weather sealed to the nines. It is fantastic. We took the S1 II out in Norway, and it was getting soaking wet. Do you remember that? I wasn't there. Oh, you weren't there. Never mind. You missed out. But it stood up to it. And the other great thing about this camera is when you're taking a lens off there, you've got a carbon fiber cover. That's going to protect it from any sort of dirt, dust, or if you forget to like leave it out in the sun and the rays are focusing on it, it can take that. So no problem. It's fantastic. Anyways, I appreciate you showing us your hometown there. Is there anything else to see around here other than your house?
Just, you wanted to look at guns.
Oh, yeah, let's go look at some guns. All right, guys, so that's the end of day one. We've had a chance to look at handling and basic image quality, and honestly, no surprises here because remember, we've seen all of this before, but I do still have some questions. Number one, now that we do have this faster partially stacked sensor in a platform like this, are we gonna get better action and sports kind of photography? Faster burst rates, yes, but will the autofocus also perform more accurately and quicker? Because that's an issue I've often had with Panasonics when it comes to fast action shooting. And Jordan will have a lot to talk about for videos. So we're gonna call it a night. We're gonna head back to the hotel, but we will see you tomorrow for a lot more. All right, guys, it's day two in Austin. It is a hot, muggy day. Thankfully, the sun's not out, but I'm sweating like a pig, and I'm not even doing the skating. But we've come to the Austin skate park here, and actually this is giving me major deja vu because I've been here before, like, I don't know, 10 years ago. Anyways, it's always a cool spot to get some shots, and we can test out the autofocusing on this S1 II. So, you know, here's the first thing I want to say about Panasonic cameras. You do have a lot of customization when it comes to things like setting up the autofocus, how responsive it is, what the lock-on strength is. Does it move to new subjects, or does it stick where you originally were? but they're not on by default. So like a lot of other camera platforms, you definitely want to go in and customize the autofocus for the situation that you're going to shoot in. But let's talk about autofocus performance just overall. So first off, having a partially stacked sensor, the faster readout does mean that the camera can draw from more frames, while you're autofocusing. That should help hit rate. But honestly, I'm already happy with the hit rate. I'm getting good results when the subject detection mode kicks in properly. I think it's doing a really good job. So human detection, face eye detection, or actually they've just added a new feature, urban sports, breakdancing, skateboarding, that kind of stuff. I'm finding that if the subject detection picks up, it actually works really well. There are some situations where it might be locked on the background, like on a tree for no reason. And so then the person comes into the scene and it doesn't quite get to them in time. But if I start tracking them from a distance and follow them up close, it's actually doing a really good job. And as you can see here, I'm happy with a lot of the hits that I'm getting. So another thing that's annoying that can't be fixed, for example, are just things like when you're using the tracking. So first off, tracking autofocus for inanimate objects, I really like that. Being able to follow something, just move around the frame, recompose, have it follow that subject and then shoot. I like it, but it doesn't work and play very nicely when you're going to use subject detection mode. So for example, let's say I turn on human eye detection. Well, if I put the box near something with a face or eyes, it will absolutely go to that. That's good, but it will no longer track inanimate objects. It becomes a fixed point in space. And so I can refocus on something else, but it won't follow that and track it. And that's kind of annoying. I gotta kick out of the subject detection in order to make the tracking box back into a tracking box. And that just seems kind of annoying. I wish it would just work seamlessly where it's intelligent enough to say, oh, you got a face, let's lock on that, recompose. But now if there's no face or eyes and I put on something else, it can track that smoothly as well. Just little things that save you time and convenience. Okay, so let's talk about buffer rate here as well as the shutter mode. So for this kind of stuff, I do like to shoot mechanical shutter. I prefer it. I eliminate any rolling shutter, and I'm still finding it plenty fast, even for sports like this. I've been shooting a lot of 7 frames per second mechanical shutter mode. You can actually push up to 10 frames and still get full autofocus continuous. And there's basically no buffer issue there. I mean, I can shoot RAWs for a very long time, way longer bursts than I would ever need to do. So in that regard, it's acceptable. But having the partially stacked sensor does unlock faster electronic burst rates, and you can push up to 70 frames per second. Now, admittedly, this is not something that I'm going to use very often, and it's important to understand that when you are in the electronic shutter mode, shooting these fast burst rates, the buffer will fill up, and when you're shooting these electronic burst modes, there's actually no difference speed-wise between an SD card or the CFexpress Type B card, even though they're radically different speeds of cards, and that's because it's actually the camera's bus speeds that become the bottleneck. They'll output the same amount of just data. It doesn't matter what card you have receiving that. So when that buffer fills, it also doesn't clear while it's shooting. And so these are all reasons why if you do these fast bursts, you're sitting there now waiting for things to clear a little bit. And again, it's rare that I would ever need these fast speeds, but it does unlock 70 frames per second. And if you want to do that, just keep in mind there are some limitations. The fact of the matter is Panasonic's just not optimizing these cameras for sports, action, wildlife photography, and so they're still not the best tool out there on the market. Oh, okay, I guess it's time to talk about video autofocus.
You've talked a lot. Okay, so looking at the video performance for this kind of fast action, the partially stacked sensor gives us some real advantages if we want to shoot actually a taller frame. So we can now record open gate where you're using the whole 3x2 sensor now up to 60 frames per second. So we can get a slow motion effect with that. But as well, they've recognized that a lot of anamorphic lenses have really strong squeeze factors, like a 1.8, a 2 times. So now we can also record a 4x3 frame, again, up to 60 frames per second, giving you some slow motion capability on these. And as Chris already mentioned, in terms of the autofocus with this faster reading sensor, I am really finding it very similar to the GH7 Micro Four Thirds camera. So what that means is, by default, again, it's not going to be ideal, but if you set it to locked on to your initial subject, I'm actually finding the tracking is quite good in those situations. The issue is the camera has to know that you're following that subject. I've got an example here where I'm filming Matt. I've put the autofocus box right on his face in human detection, and the camera's just like, no, I think we're just going to stay on this railing for a little while. No, a little longer. But once you do actually force focus onto that subject or tap it with the back screen, then again, it's quite sticky and quite resilient. Now for video profiles on the S1 II, it's actually very similar to what we saw before with the S1 II a few months ago. So that means we do have the ability to record internal RAW video using ProRes RAW or ProRes RAW HQ. As well, you've got H.264, H.265, all the different flavors that they've had on previously, and we get the full V-Log color gamma with tons and tons of dynamic range.
So I hope you guys enjoyed that little educational thing on the sports and action capabilities of the S1 II. And you know, like, the buffer's huge. It's got a really good buffer. I could shoot 3 full seconds at 70 frames per second. I mean, over 200 shots before it has to slow down. That's fine. And again, I'm barely ever going to use that. Like, this camera does have some good capability for fast action shooting. And the focus is, for the most part, reliable. You just kind of got to dive in the menus and really know what you're doing to set up the camera properly to get the most out of it. But I still wonder, like, how do I feel about this camera as a photographic camera? I like the image quality. 24 megapixels is certainly enough, but if I wanted something that would do even better sports action photography, be more versatile all around, I'd probably look at like the Nikon Z6 III. It's got good video. I feel it's got better photographic capabilities as far as autofocusing performance goes, and it's less money. And then what if I wanted like the best photographic quality capable? Well, then I would look at the S1 II that we recently played with. Same camera basically, it's got great features. You get the 45 megapixels. It's only a little bit more money to get that. It's not a big jump. And honestly, I still get things like 10 frame per second shooting in mechanical, which suits most of my fast action needs, or handheld multi-shot high-res modes if I feel I need more megapixels. And again, that S1 II is just gonna give me even more of that. Okay, so as you've seen throughout this video, Jordan and I have been kind of just changing roles here, going back and forth, you know, where it's pertinent for both photography and videography. But Jordan has a lot more to talk about. So I think I'm gonna check out here, consider that my photographic conclusion. Let's go to Jordan, because he's got to talk about a lot more when it comes to video uninterrupted.
All right, I'm back and we've got a lot to talk about. Now, I started with kind of the internal record modes that you can put directly to the SD card or the CFexpress. But one thing I really like about Panasonic is there's some extra versatility, whether you want to kick out through the HDMI port, where you can get ProRes RAW to an Atomos recorder, but you can also record B-RAW to any of the Blackmagic external recorders as well. So Resolve users will still have access to RAW footage. The other really nice thing is you can kick out absolutely any of the internal record modes through the USB port out to an SSD. And very importantly, you can now move files between the SD card, CFexpress, and SD. So let's say I'm shooting all my clips to CFexpress, but I want to have them ready to just plug right into the computer when I get home. I can move them onto the SSD while I'm in the field, and they're ready to go as soon as I get to my computer. Now, I'm also not going to dwell on them here because they're not new necessarily, but all of the things I really liked with the S1 II have been carried over to this. So you've got best-in-class stabilization with the cropless mode, which will give you a little bit of vignetting if you're using a hood, otherwise just delivers slightly more stable footage. We're getting things like 32-bit float audio if you're using the XLR attachment, and the best assist tools in the industry. We're talking waveforms, false colors, you can adjust the size of it. Everything works exactly the way I would want it to. Now, timecode is a wonderful technology for synchronizing multiple cameras on multicam shoots, but historically, if you're using a mirrorless camera, it's been an absolutely enormous pain in the ass. So Panasonic is trying to address that, and they now have Bluetooth support wirelessly. You can now synchronize multiple cameras through the Atomos UltraSync, and this is just fully wireless. Just enable Bluetooth on the camera, and it will let you jam the signal, so all of them are perfectly synchronized in post. And if you shut these cameras down or move them out of range, it'll try and maintain that timecode situation. Once it returns in range, it'll attempt to resync for any potential drift that's happened. This is just a very elegant solution. The only drawback is you do have to sync all of the cameras one at a time, but honestly, that's more a problem with Atomos's unit than what Panasonic's doing here. And if you're doing a multicam shoot, this might be enough to just get you to invest in an S-series Panasonic camera. But hang on, we're gonna get visited by the ghost of future Jordan, who's gonna tell you about all the incredible results I found for rolling shutter and overheating performance on this camera.
Hey, it's me, future Jordan, the Jordan who has done rolling shutter tests on the Panasonic S1 II. So let me tell you what I've found out. The partially stacked sensor on this camera is paying huge dividends compared to what we'll see on the S1 IIe or the S5 II series of cameras. Taking a look at the 6K open gate recording, which goes up to 30 frames per second, I'm getting readout speeds of around 12 milliseconds, which is very good. Generally, rolling shutter will not be noticeable in your clips. And interestingly, you can record 5.1K 60 frame per second, still using that full sensor area, and I'm getting the same readout speed. So that means if you're using the 5.1K 60 frames per second, you're getting a super sampled image, so it's still gonna have nice detail and really good low light performance. As expected, readout is a little bit faster when you're using the 16:9 record modes on this camera because we're cropping the top and bottom off, so we're getting around 10 milliseconds on those modes. Now, I mentioned earlier there's also an option to use dynamic range boost on some of the slower frame rates, and I can see why it's only available if we're recording 30 frames per second and under, because it dramatically slows down the sensor. Here we're looking at probably around 25 millisecond readout for the 16:9 recording modes. We're definitely seeing a dynamic range improvement when this mode is used, but as you can see here, rolling shutter is very evident whenever this mode is enabled. Okay, next let's talk about overheating, which shouldn't be much of a concern because this camera does have a fan on it, but bear in mind, the S1 II was actually a little bit susceptible to overheating with some of its more demanding record modes. So I kicked things right off with the most demanding record mode, ProRes RAW HQ at 5.8K 30 frames per second. These are absolutely massive files, so I had to record for 21 minutes till my card filled up, delete the file, and start that process over again. And I was actually able to do this 3 times, not before the camera overheated, but before the battery died, getting me 64 minutes of total record time on that, and didn't even have an overheating warning on the camera. The only way I could get the camera to overheat was actually using faster frame rates still with high resolution footage. So when I did 5.8K at 60 frames per second, just H.265, again right to the card, I got an overheat warning at 35 minutes and was able to record for 48 minutes total before the camera shut down. I also wanted to see how the open gate 5.1K 60p recording would do, and that seems to be the most demanding mode on this camera. Overheat warning at 30 minutes, and then at 41 minutes the camera did overheat. So essentially, as long as you don't need high resolution, high frame rate recording for long stretches of time, you're gonna have absolutely no issues with the S1 II. And if you do need long recordings, it's a better option than the higher resolution S1 II. All right, back to Jordan of the past.
Thanks, future Jordan. So where does the S1 II sit if you're looking at a hybrid photo video camera? The natural competition for this would be the Nikon Z6 III. And as Chris has already touched on, I think that's a more capable photographer's camera, especially if you want to capture fast-moving subjects. But for video shooters, there's a lot to recommend the S1 II. We've got the open gate recording, anamorphic support, better built-in image stabilization. I think that might be worth the significant premium you'll have to pay on this camera. Compared to the S1 II, that might be worth looking at if you want the absolute most high resolution recording, but the slower readout on that really hampers some of its record modes. I think if you're looking primarily at a video camera, S1 II is definitely the better option. But if you've been paying attention to the opening screens in our videos, you'll know I actually use the Panasonic GH7 a lot because that does still have faster readout than this camera, but not significantly. So I think if I were looking for the most well-rounded Panasonic video camera, it's going to be this. Sure, not quite as fast a readout, but significantly better low light performance and dynamic range than the Micro Four Thirds options. Last thing you might be wondering is, well, there is inevitably going to be an S1H Mark II coming out, but I do strongly suspect, looking at the past, that's going to be quite a bit more expensive camera with an even further emphasis on video features. The S1 II will cover most of what video shooters are going to need, and if it falls within your budget, this is probably the best option. So I have had a wonderful time in Austin, and just huge thanks to Matt Johnson, WhoIsMatt on YouTube, for showing us around this wonderful place and Buc-ee's. But thank you so much for watching. If you have questions about this camera, be sure to leave them in the comments down below, and we're going to answer a bunch of those questions on the PetaPixel podcast, where we're definitely going to be talking about this camera. You can watch it right here on our YouTube channel, or just listen to it on all your favorite podcasting apps. Just search for the PetaPixel podcast. And if you want to support the work that Chris and Jaron and I are doing out here in muggy Austin, the best way to do that is with a PetaPixel membership. $3 a month, $30 a year, you can access PetaPixel, the entire website, ads-free, get discounts on our merch store, and you can download full resolution images from full production cameras, including in the future, this S1 Mark II. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you all again soon with more on PetaPixel.